And I became passionate about behavior because in the world of child protective services, there's so much trauma, there's so many unmet needs of children that just creates barriers. And so while even in that system, I knew what I was drawn to was working with those intensive behaviors to help maintain foster placements, to help foster reunification successfully, and to keep children in their least restrictive environment to promote overall independence and success. It's a parent's job to fiercely advocate and find what is going to be a good fit. And I think, isn't that the point of being a parent, that we are all just going to die tirelessly trying to find the best fits for our children along the way so that they can best succeed and be as independent as possible.
Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm so glad you're here. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about helping others reclaim their stories so they can build their most beautiful future. Now, today we have a wonderful guest, an expert in helping people do just that and helping them communicate and connect in a way so that they can build relationships and futures that are so beautiful. Payne is a board-certified behavior analyst with a master's in clinical psychology who has worked everywhere from CPS, a state hospital, as an autism specialist for the Kansas Autism Waiver, a behavioral specialist for the May Institute of Autism, and as a licensed behavior analyst serving in the Bowling Green, Kentucky community as we speak. She is now also the author of Behavior Breakthrough, co-authored by Jen Lil Brown. I am so grateful to have Bailey here on the show today to share her experiences, talk about her book, and how she is not only serving her community, but also creating a space in social media for tackling these at times difficult but extremely important topics. Payne, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
What a beautiful introduction. Hopefully we live up to that, but absolutely, that's the goal. So excited to be here. Thanks, Dr. Shafer.
I'm so happy that you are here. There is so much to talk about, and this is a topic that's getting a lot of play on social media, right? We hear a lot on social media. We don't always hear from experts, and that's why I think it's so important to have you on the show and to share your expertise with us. Now, to get back to the beginning of what inspired you to get to the point that you're at now in your life, what inspired you to become a therapist?
Gosh, I have no idea. I think that for people, especially in the behavior world, it seems to be a very common response that when asked that question, it's a very loaded question and nobody has a very clear answer. And most of us are just kind of like, I don't know, I kind of just fell into it. And so for me, the falling path was I graduated with my bachelor's degree in psychology, and there's really not a lot you can do with that. And so I started doing child protective services, and that is where I really became passionate about advocating for those that nobody else really advocates for. I became passionate about working in broken, underfunded systems, and I became passionate about behavior because in the world of child protective services, there's so much trauma, there's so many unmet needs of children that just creates barriers. And so while even in that system, I knew what I was drawn to was working with those intensive behaviors to help maintain foster placements, to help foster reunification successfully, and to keep children in their least restrictive environment to promote overall independence and success. And so from there, hop, skip, and a jump, I just landed in the field of behavioral analysis, which happened to just be a really good fit for me.
I've heard you speak on this before, and I think it's so important, and it's an example of the right path forward isn't always the easiest path. And I've heard you speak about your experiences working with CPS and seeing how easy it was to go the route of taking a child out of a situation entirely versus the higher friction, but often higher reward route for both
Yeah.
children and the people in their world of working with them on behaviors, not only of a child, but of the people that are in their world to try to maintain that cohesive unit. What was it about your experiences as you transitioned? You were a young adult when you transitioned into CPS. As you transitioned to your own early life experiences, then into CPS, and then getting your master's, how did that influence your worldview on family systems and on what you felt was the best path forward for making meaningful change for them?
Yes, such a wonderful question. And I don't even know that I can adequately put it into words, but I'm going to try. I was hired to do child protective services when I was 20 years old. What? I mean, I was a child. And I also came from a family of privilege. We had dinners at the dinner table. My parents worked in public education. I had the very like stereotypical American household that was filled with love. And when I entered Child Protective Services, everybody laughed at me in my office because I didn't know that that's what I was interviewing for. I thought that I was interviewing for a like case management job that would help children that had maybe some dual diagnoses or something. That's what I thought that I was going to be doing. And then I went to training and I was like, oh, this is like child abuse and neglect. Like just so naive, so
Mm.
naive. But I definitely say that that is the job that made me a woman for sure. That is where I encountered probably diversity for the first time in my life. That's the time where I encountered poverty for the first time in my life, encountered mental health struggles for the first time in my life in a deep way and understood it. That's the first time that I encountered domestic violence in a way that I mean I think that that my experience has given me this perspective that I don't think that our world can have compassion for other people unless you have been up close and personal with something similar of that situation. We have to really get close and get proximate with people of certain populations, of certain diversities, of people that are different than us in whatever way it is, to really be able to show compassion for that, because you have a new level of understanding for it. And when you can understand a person's struggles and why they struggle, where those struggles come from, it just allows us to have a different level of compassion and not blame. And I think that that is just so much of what the world needs. And I will always be so grateful for 20-year-old Bailey entering the world of child protective services, because that is the views that it gave me. And that's the foundation that has been provided for me to now be in different careers, in different settings, in homes and schools and on college campuses, where my entire perspective is just different of humans.
And another thing that I've heard you speak about that I would love if you feel comfortable sharing more about your life experiences is navigating something that we all navigated, but with different things in our rowboats, right? Different people in our rowboats, different tools, was COVID, and how that also impacted the way you approached your practice, approach your patients, your clients, school systems. What was in your rowboat when the wave came, and how did that impact you moving forward?
Yeah, to me, when we speak about COVID, it's not necessarily to me about not being able to access the world, not being able to access socialization, not being able to access my clients and my job. For me personally, I associate COVID with being a single mom. That was the time in my life where I had access to no support outside of what I could provide myself. And I had a high needs neurodivergent 2-year old at my feet when I was trying to work and still provide support to my clients when I needed support more than anything. And that's when I started kind of a social media outlet. I was trying to provide other people what I desperately needed, which was a sense of community, but also help. And being a behavior analyst, I knew the skills, I had the skills, but I was in such survival mode, right? We've all been there, that when we're in a state of survival mode and struggle and without access to support and without a light at the end of the tunnel of when that support is coming, it is so challenging and damaging. But then, when you kind of had mentioned the journey, the difficult journey, but man, on the other side of that journey, I mean, my life is so different now, and I have access to so much rich support, that I just always tell people that's what I gained from COVID, is that if you are in the storm, I don't know when the end of your storm is coming. The length of everybody's storms are different, but I promise the storm is for a reason, and something is coming at some point at the end of that storm that is going to make it full circle make sense.
I so appreciate that. I've lived it. I know so many of the wonderful storytellers that are listening with us right now have lived it or are still in the storm, and it buoys them up a bit to hear that just keep holding on. You're going to get through this. Another really important thing I've heard you speak about that I think is so beautiful, and I'm curious how you bring that into your everyday practice, working with students, working with educators, how you have really highlighted how important it is to see people, everyone in a situation. So let's say you're called into a class because there's a behavioral issue or a myriad of behavioral issues and they need some help resetting, they need some structure there. Your approach is one of recognizing the importance of every individual and making sure that their human needs are being met and that their needs for connection are being met before you give tools, because that feels more like correction than help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that whether I step foot into somebody's personal home, whether I step foot into a classroom or a community service provider, no matter what it is, I think that it is necessary, right? I'm a behavior analyst, so I'm usually being called in for intensive behavioral support needs. And so the first thing that I look at are there unmet needs here, right? It's not just about, oh, here's your behavioral strategies. Oh, have you tried this? Have you done this? Do you know about the function of behavior? Okay, there, that's what you need to do. It's minimize attention. We're going to miss the mark, because human behavior cannot be boxed in to four categories. It just can't. That's a gross overgeneralization. And we're going to miss an opportunity to not just establish an effective relationship, rapport, and connection with somebody, to really see somebody, to actually really understand them. We're also not going to make a difference, and we're not going to be able to effectively change behavior. And so it is ethically necessary to look at unmet needs first. Are there some stressors here? Is there a medical cause behind this? Is there some neurology behind this to explain things? Is there a mental health diagnosis and symptoms behind these behaviors to explain things? Is there something here in the environment, whether it's with the child or student that I'm there to see, or I've been that single mom, and I had very significant unmet needs during that time of my life that made it difficult for me to parent. And so, what about the staff? What about that parent? What about this teacher? Everyone in the environment, their needs need to be evaluated first before the tools, strategies, before any next step is even going to remotely make a difference.
And you know what you make me think of, because that is all so important. And I think many of us don't necessarily, we're not conditioned to take the time, to take the pause to even go that route, right? We focus on correcting behavior. Often that was what was modeled for us as children. But also, in order for that new first step, right? If we reset and we say, no, 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 first we need to take the temperature of the room and make sure that everyone is basically optimized to learn these new skills, right? We have to make sure we're ready, we're optimized. But I think there might be a step even before that. And that's a step of, is it a safe environment where people feel that they can show up authentically and share if there's an issue, or will that itself be punished, right? Have we created such an environment of punishment and a restrained capacity to show up, right? I can only show up in this small column of who I am. I have to leave the rest at home, even if I can't really put the rest at home right now because it's not something I can let go of, right? In this moment in time, this struggle is bigger and it doesn't fit in my house. It's coming with me to school. I need help, but I don't feel like I can bring it up as an educator or as a single parent. You know, there are a lot of really challenging co-parenting situations where someone may be struggling and may need help and they don't feel safe to open up about that. And they're trying to be strong, but we know when it comes to behavioral and mental health and our health in general, being strong is asking for help. So how can we take that pause and that time to take the temperature and also cultivate an environment where someone feels that they can connect with us authentically and share that something's wrong? And are there steps that when you come into a classroom that you take, or maybe something before you show up that someone could take in their school to say, hey, let's make sure we have a culture where we're addressing the needs of everyone before we fixate on the behaviors?
Absolutely. That's a perfect example of an unmet need that I definitely would evaluate. It's not just about physical safety, it's also about emotional safety. If a student or a child struggles with executive functioning skills, problem solving skills, emotional regulation, all of those higher level executive functioning skills, that can present behavioral challenges. And there we have to create environments where are emotions allowed here? Are behaviors allowed here? Right? Because when there are some skill deficits at play, those behaviors are going to happen. Right? And let's just remember too that it's developmentally appropriate for every child to quote unquote misbehave from time to time. That's part of development. And also, let's normalize the fact too that it's developmentally appropriate for adults to also overreact and misbehave from time to time too, because we are working, breathing, living human beings with needs. And parents don't get their needs met all the time. Adults don't get their needs met all the time, and neither do children. And it's a learning process how to cope with that. And so the environment has to be prepared to allow that to happen. And I think that that's a lot of, effective trauma informed care also is allowing, can spontaneous behaviors happen in this environment? And is that allowed? And is it welcomed? Or is it shunned and punished to where now I'm fearful and uncomfortable to be in this space? And that definitely drives what type of future behaviors are going to unfold in that environment.
Yeah. I really appreciate you speaking on that because I think there are so many steps before getting to the actual behavior modification. And that's one of the reasons I'm just so excited to have you here today, because I think often we quote unquote fail in fixing. I'm using lots of air quotes for people who aren't watching and they're just listening, using lots of air quotes. We fail in fixing things in part because we're starting, it's like we're playing Candyland and we're trying to start in the middle of the board, but we need to start at the beginning. We need to start at the beginning. Moving forward, once we've tried to create an environment that's safe and we are taking the temperature of the room. One thing that you've talked about is that there's no miracle fix. I think that's important with setting expectations. And I've heard you follow that up with, encouraging, focusing rather on the behavior itself, but on the skill building one step, one day at a time. Can you talk to me about your process with that? And also through the book, how it helps provide a scaffolding for incorporating that?
Yeah. So just to kind of provide your listeners some like actionable, tangible steps? You talked about kind of preparing the room for emotions being welcomed, and like how can we do that? I think too, like it can be very simple, and just communicating, like have a signal with your classroom, have a signal with your child, whatever that means. In my household, right, we have a signal, we make a T, and that means, hey, you are welcome to tell the truth without consequences, because I don't want to punish truth telling in my household. I want my children to be honest, right? So maybe you have a sign, whatever it is, two hands up, a heart symbol, whatever makes sense for your household, that can signal you can talk to me about anything and you won't be in trouble, right? Because usually, quote unquote, being in trouble for a child signals I'm going to lose access to the things that are most valuable to me. And so we get so offended when our children don't talk to us or are dishonest with us, so that they can protect access to the things that's most valuable to them. But I think if we really look in the mirror, I am certain that we do that as adults also. And it's a pretty healthy coping skill, right? And so I think that we just have to be so purposeful about having language, having a sign to signal to our children and signal to our students that there needs to be moments where emotions are welcomed, where open and honest communication is welcomed without punishment, without consequences, for the sake of connection building, relationship building, and healthy communication that's going to create healthy, lasting future generations of children, right? And so you had mentioned too, that I think that a perspective, once challenging behaviors or intensive behavior support needs are unfolding in your house, in your classroom, wherever it is, I think that society has this perspective of viewing behavior kind of on a disrespect scale, right? How disrespectful, how problematic, how challenging is this? And I'm going to respond by picking a punisher that matches how disrespectful or how punishing the behavior is, right? And we send our kids to timeout. We ground our children. Maybe a child receives in school suspension or maybe an out of school suspension. And then they return back to the natural environment after that timeout, after the grounding, after the in school suspension, after the out of school suspension, whatever the situation is. And we usually get that exact same behavior issue again soon, or maybe a new and different challenging intensive behavior support need arises. And the reason is because we never taught that child or student how to get their needs met, right? You can punish behavior, but you can't punish my needs. My human needs are never going to go away. You can punish my behavior and I'll create a new behavior to access and meet my needs, because you can't make my needs go away.
That's so well stated. And it just makes me think about the adage that no behavior is bad, it's communication. And if we're just focusing on that's a bad behavior, we're missing entirely, we've literally missed the entire boat on that it was communication. If you send a child home and potentially into the situation that is maybe challenging for them at the moment and affecting their behavior at school. And so if you just send them out of school back into that same environment without hearing what they're communicating to you about their needs, it can come back tenfold, because now maybe home's not a safe feeling place for them. And now school isn't a safe feeling place either.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we have got to, and it helps us, it also cope with our own children's behaviors, right? I'm a mom of two. My children are far from perfect. They're just real humans, just like all of us. And that when my children misbehave, I resonate with, as a parent, I'm like, whoa, we don't act like this. So I did not teach this to you. That I don't want to send my children out into the world behaving like this, right? And so our perspective in society makes us almost view behavior like this is such a problem. I need to fix it. But if we can change that perspective to, in the moment, not viewing it as a problem, but viewing it as, okay, this is developmentally appropriate, disruptive, and not enjoyable for me. But what is the need behind this behavior? What is my child, what is my student trying to accomplish? Do they not have the tolerance for this task? Is this too challenging? Do I need to break this down into smaller steps? Do I need to teach them to ask for help? Do I need to teach them to ask to step away and take a moment away? Right? And I need to, right? I need that as a mom often, and I need to be modeling these things. And I need to create this open dialogue with my children of whatever your sign is. Whoa, 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 whoa. What is it you think? What does your body need right now? What does your mind need right now? How are you feeling? And how can I get my children to communicate the need? And if my child's not able to communicate the need, then right, I need to go through this process of trying to figure out what that need is, because the consequences are just going to punish a behavior, and a new disruptive behavior is going to arise until we get to what that need is. And I think that when teachers and parents have this perspective, it doesn't become about student reputations. It doesn't become about a problematic child or behavior. It just becomes a human with needs. And I want to help this person change the reputation, change the trajectory of their lives by teaching them to get to the bottom of what the need is.
Hmm. So well said. And I think, going back to towards the beginning of what you said, not seeing a child's behavior as a report card on your parenting or your teaching, because that becomes about
Absolutely. I
you,
say
and then we're in our emotions. Yeah.
1,000%. I say so often that the best, what is it? The best reflection of parenting is not your child's behavior. It's your own behavior. Right. And
Mm.
it's so, for just that reason, it's so true. And, and I'll share that often on social media, and I don't even read the comments because it's a dumpster fire of people disagreeing with it. But at the end of the day, right, my children's future behavior, maybe not in the moment, but their future behavior depends on my behavior. So the best reflection of parenting is not my child's behavior. It's my behavior, because my behavior drives their future behavior.
Mm. It's such good insight. Something that you talk about a lot is, kind of going on to the actionable ways that we can help families and help people in the teaching setting and educational settings. Talk about the difference between rewards versus reinforcement. So we've tried to set the stage for healthy communication. We see a behavior that we have concerns about, we feel we need to intervene. What does it look like when you're approaching it from trying to focus on rewards versus reinforcement?
Man, we could talk days about this, but briefly reviewing it, right? So for me, I think that almost reinforcement is like a trigger word for people. They're like, oh, no, that's bribery. No, I'm not giving my kid anything extra. They need to do what they're expected to do. And I'm kind of like, okay, well, like, I hope that works for you. If not, come back, let me know, and we can problem solve this, because reinforcement isn't treasure boxes. Reinforcement isn't candy. Reinforcement isn't a pizza party on Fridays. While, yes, those things are enjoyable, those are more commonly rewards, right? Rewards are things, they're social constructs that are considered enjoyable. High fives, stickers, right? Whatever a child or student's preferences are, that's more of a reward. Rewards are socially enjoyable, but rewards rarely change behavior. Rewards may change behavior for a minute because they're new and novel and fun and socially enjoyable, but rewards don't meet needs. So therefore, their impact is temporary, whereas reinforcement is closely associated with our human needs, right? A break, time away, getting access to help, right? We pick things in our lives that's reinforcing. We all have our favorite restaurant maybe to go out to eat at, and we find it reinforcing because the food is good. They have a menu that caters to my children's needs. It's clean. The service is good. There's never a long wait. Those are all reinforcing aspects, right? Reinforcement is closely associated with human needs, where rewards are closely associated with socially considered enjoyable. Rewards
Mm.
impact behavior temporarily, whereas reinforcement, that's going to change things for the long term.
You know what I see too, what I see in my mind, I'm a very visual thinker as you speak about this. With reward, I see it being very external. So I'm a woman, right? So be a good girl. Be something, almost be something you're not. Like, don't you want to be a good girl? You get a piece of candy, right? So it makes it outside of you. Whereas reinforcement is more of an acknowledgement of who you are and what you need, what will help you grow, and saying like, I see you, I see what you need, and I'm going to work with you. And the way that hits me as an individual and inspires me on how I want to move forward is completely different, because after the candy taste is gone and your dopamine high is gone, it's just gone because it wasn't you. It was like I performed this behavior. Versus with reinforcement, there's this sense of being seen and being cared for that then I think it sets you on a different path for behavior moving forward.
I think absolutely. To me, rewards is the relationship aspect of it is removed, right? Because rewards are easy. Most kids love candy. Boom. Most kids love iPad time. Boom. Right? And there is an element of understanding needs that's being missed. Now, granted, what is a child most often going to pick? A reinforcer that matches and correlates with their need, or a reward that's shiny, yummy, and fun? They're often going to pick the reward. So I often get feedback from parents and educators that's like, I don't know why it's not working because they picked it. Well, they're picking rewards because socially and culturally that makes sense for us, right? And developmentally, a child isn't probably going to select to work for or do something that's less enjoyable for for meeting my needs. No thanks, I'd rather have candy. But the candy isn't going to change the behavior in the long, right? And so for me, this is about, we're just talking reinforcement for trying to increase desired behaviors that we want to see more of. For me, absolutely, reinforcement is love. For me, it is the deepest level of connection because I understand a human's needs when I can use reinforcement to increase future displays of better behaviors by teaching somebody how to assertively get your needs met. And then I can reinforce that, and we consequently get less and less disruptive behaviors.
Hmm. And I can think of a lot of times when adults may choose rewards in their daily life
Absolutely.
that maybe feel good for half a moment, but are going against their goals that they have for themselves because they're stuck in that, and they're not really ready to buy in to the reinforcement behaviors. But I think that will also resonate with our listeners because everyone who's listening to the show is either in the contemplative stage or in the active stage of working on their goals, working on their habits to reach them, to develop habits and a lifestyle that gets them where they want to go. And so I think this is helpful not only as a discussion for behavioral management with children and in schools, but I think it's also important. It hits home for us as adults as well. There's something else that you talk about that I think is really important when you're thinking about how to address when you want to deliver praise to someone, the difference between, what is descriptive praise and why is it so important and effective for helping with behavior modification versus other types of praise.
Yes, in order to change behavior, the environment has to be ready and prepared. So it's not just about consequences or discipline or punishment. The environment has to be prepared to promote pro social behavior so that our responses make an impact. If we focus on responses only, it's only going to work temporarily. And part of making that environment ready for behavior change includes, you talk about habits. And as a behavior analyst, I say often that I'm just in the business of selling habit changes to people that don't want to buy it. And changing habits is so challenging, right? We've all tried it and we can change it for a minute, but then maintaining it is a whole nother struggle. Like let's just normalize that changing habits is very hard. And so part of that habit change is our interactions, how we say things, what we say, what I attend to, what I notice. My perspective drives my interactions and drives my habits with my children and students in my environment. And so part of preparing that environment and teaching those around me how to access my attention, because I think as parents or educators, it resonates with us that our children oftentimes are motivated to get our attention and motivated by our attention, motivated by our interactions, motivated by our reactions. And so my behavior teaches my children how to get my attention reliably, based on what I comment on, based on what I talk about, based on what I notice, based on what I talk about with my children or students. And so if I am praising my children, right, I want to be specific about the behaviors I notice so that I teach my children and students specifically what behaviors get my attention. So saying things like, wow, I am so thankful to see you sharing that. Wow, I see you sitting with nice hands in your lap while your sister's playing with your favorite toy. I know that has to be really hard, and you are making such a great choice. I noticed how I asked you to put your shoes on one time and I walked away and I came back and your shoes are on. I appreciate it. You are so responsible. I appreciate your help today. When we take time to talk like this, our interactions are teaching what behaviors will reliably access my attention. Versus when I say things like, you're interrupting. I have asked you 19 times. This is very disrespectful. This needs to stop. Mommy is very tired today. I am tired of asking you to do things over and over and over. Right? When we talk like this in crisis management mode or reaction mode, now I'm teaching that what behaviors are reliable at accessing my attention. Right? And so actionable, tangible steps here. If your cup is empty and you just can't deliver the descriptive praise in the moment, it's just best to minimize our interactions in that moment.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Such good advice. I really appreciate it. And it's hard, but I will say when your cup's empty and it almost feels performative. I think if you actually listen to your thoughts in general, because I think, we're hard on ourselves, but I think we typically are quite generous with other people in our thoughts. We may reflexively criticize outwardly, but I think there is this instinctual generosity we have with others. And so if you pause and say, I'm not going to say anything. I'm covering my mouth here. And I'm just going to sit with my thoughts for a moment. I think you will actually hear gratitude, right? So you will hear when your kids are getting ready for school and they do the thing that maybe for a week they haven't been doing and you've been having to, cue them. And they do it in your head. You probably think, yeah, finally they heard me. They're doing it. Yay. But you don't say that out loud. We're not as trained to express that verbally. And so take those opportunities to I think with habits, the great thing is to focus on where you are already rather than a new habit. Like start with where you are. So like every nice thing you think about your kids, commit to actually saying it out loud and start there
Yeah.
and build from there. Because even if you're frustrated and your cup is empty, I bet there are a lot of thoughts that you could pause for a moment to share that you're already thinking that would brighten their day and kind of get you to a place that's more connective, even in those moments where you're 5 minutes late and the dog ate the homework or whatever it is.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a perspective that I take often is, I think that especially when it's our personal children, it's like I can get onto them because I'm mom. But I think if we take the perspective when my cup is empty and you make a purposeful decision in those hard moments to think, What would I want my child's teacher to say to them in this moment? What would I want the babysitter to say to them in this moment? Right. And that makes us kind of step outside our own struggles, because I don't want anybody else to struggle with my children. I want to be the only one that struggles with my children, right? Because we view our children are so wonderful. They're so covered with our love that I don't want anybody else to see them struggle. So what would I want a teacher to tell my child in that moment? And maybe that can help kind of flip that switch a little bit to guide a little bit of a different interaction. And right, going back to those habits and changing those habits that are so deeply ingrained in us and, rooted in our learning histories and how we were raised, and changing cycles and all of the things are so challenging. We can use kind of a habit stacking process for just starting to notice our own behavior of, oh, I gave a corrective feedback and now I taught my child that these undesired behaviors are exactly what I attended to. Well, then just create a habit stacking goal where, okay, I've caught myself. Now I'm going to notice the next good. And then slowly fade out the corrections and redirections to where you are really just attending to more desired behaviors, and you're delivering far more descriptive praise than attention to the undesired behaviors.
I love that. And I love the focus on taking it step by step, moment by moment, and giving yourself grace when you make mistakes, because you will. And that's also something so important, to gracefully navigate your mistakes, not just with the person you maybe hurt along the way or frustrated along the way, but also showing grace to yourself, because you want your kids to be able to do that for themselves too. I would love to talk about something. It's kind of the elephant in the room, because there's a lot going around on social media and in autism support groups, et cetera, about ABA. And that is something I'd like to hear your perspective on, because I've heard you speak on this, and how I can almost hear the pain in your voice because of the relationship you have and the way that you utilize this approach versus the experience some people have had when they were growing up in therapy. So, can you share briefly for our audience, what is ABA specifically? What are some conceptions people have? And then how do you see this mode of treatment, and why are you so passionate about utilizing it with the people in your community and on social media?
Yeah, so ABA stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis. It's the leading treatment for autism, right? And so I think that if you know or love somebody with autism, you've probably heard of ABA. And absolutely, if you read about ABA on social media, on blog posts, it's a dumpster fire, right? And there is a lot of negative feedback about ABA therapy. And I think that a lot of the typical negative feedback is that it's abusive, that it doesn't attend to human needs, that we just train little parrots, and it's more like training tricks, as opposed to really teaching lasting skills. And I think that my response to this is, I think that I can see how that happens. Absolutely. And I don't think when people are sharing their personal experiences, I don't question it. I don't think that they're lying. I believe to my core that it's real. And I think that it is so disheartening, right? And I think it's very similar to any area in life, right? That I think that not everybody has had a great doctor where their needs were heard and where they were treated appropriately. I think that every student doesn't enter the classroom that's best fit for them to where their needs were met and they were best educated. I think that not every police officer experience has been appropriate, safe, right? But that doesn't mean that all educators are bad. It doesn't mean that all police officers are bad. It doesn't mean that all doctors are bad. To me, that's an overgeneralization. But I do want to validate that it's not personal if a therapist isn't a good fit for your family. It just means that. that it means that this company, this therapist is not a good fit for us. And it's a parent's job to fiercely advocate and find what is going to be a good fit. And I think, isn't that the point of being a parent, that we are all just going to die tirelessly trying to find the best fits for our children along the way so that they can best succeed and be as independent as possible. So for me personally, I know for a fact that applied behavioral analysis has laid the roadmap for me to disseminate love in a very deep way, in a very strategic way, and in a very evidence based way. But every teacher teaches different based on their learning history, based on their experiences, based on their culture, based on how proximate they've been able to come with adversity and diversity. And so we're all just humans. And I don't know that I can represent the field as a whole, but I can represent Bailey. And my goal is one starfish at a time. And I hope that some little nugget of good comes along the way, because that's just my only goal.
Well, that certainly radiates from you and in your social media and the work you do, your book. And I so appreciate your so human and connecting approach to sharing these tools and focusing less on behavior and more on skill building, because once you build the skills, the behavior can stop, because the need to communicate that a need is not being met will stop, because we've got the skills to meet the need. So we're changing the jumping off point in the conversation. And I feel that that is so important and so helpful. And I'm so grateful for the important work that you're doing and how you're sharing it so generously.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shafer.
Thank you so much, Bailey. Now, please share with our group of storytellers here on Talks with Dr. Shafer how they can connect with you, follow you on social media, and get your book.
Sure. You can find me at baileypayne.com. And then you can find Behavior Breakthrough at all major book retailers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bailey, for being here and sharing so much incredible information. This has been so wonderful to have this chat with you today.
Yes, thank you so much. We will keep at it and keep spreading love.
We definitely will. And thank you so much to our storytellers for being here. We really appreciate your time and hope that you learned something incredible today. I know I took a lot of things. I've got 4 kids, so I've got little like nuggets that I'm going to put in my pocket and be thinking about the rest of the day. And I hope you do too. Make sure that you comment on social media, both at Talks with Dr. Shafer and on Bailey Payne's platform, so that we know what you took away, what you want to hear more about. We're here to share important information with you and support you. Until next time, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.